Hi everybody, and thank you for your participation at this first IC2I webinar dedicated to the US Cleantech market. So maybe I will first present you the program of this webinar. Yes, that's it. Thank you, Maria. So Maria and from the Greentech cluster and myself from Tweed will first present you the COSME project and the matchmaking mission in New York in May. And then we will have the opportunity to listen to 4 speakers, experienced speakers from 3 organizations: Advantage Austria in Chicago, Hodgson Huss, and also 151 Advisor. And there will be a time for question and answer for after each presentation. And those speakers will share their vision of the US market and will provide some advice and present opportunities for startup and SMEs for the US market. Maya, maybe can you now present the project?
Of course, thanks, Paul. Hello, everybody. My name is Maria Ortner. I'm a project manager and developer at the Greentech cluster in Austria, and I'm responsible for the internationalization support for our cluster partners and members in Austria, and I have the lead for this project. The EC2I stands for European Cleantech Internationalization Initiative, and I'll give you a short overlook what it's about. It's an EU-funded project in the COSME called Cluster for Internationalization. We are 5 consortium partners, and we are all Cleantech clusters from Europe, namely Clean from Denmark, Sustainable Business Hub from Sweden, Energie from France, Tweed from Belgium, and us, the Cleantech cluster in Austria.
Maria, sorry to interrupt you. Can you speak a bit closer to the microphone, please? We have a bit trouble hearing you here in Copenhagen.
Okay, everybody else, how can you
Much
hear me?
better.
Okay, then I'll just keep it like that. Thanks, Frederick.
Yeah,
thanks.
hold it closer. Thank you.
You're welcome, thanks. The project itself will last for 2 years. We started now in January 2018, and our goals are, on the one hand, to stimulate the internationalization activities of our cluster partners with focus on SMEs and with the focus in target markets in China and US. We want to foster the collaboration between buyers and customers in this market, and we want to integrate the solutions and capacities from our SME partners along the value chain. We have defined a few there. I will come to that point on the next slide. It's also important to establish and develop strategic partnerships in each target market. For example, in the US, it's Urban Future Lab, another cluster. And also, for example, Advantage Austria would be one of these strategic partners which help our SMEs to enter the US or Chinese market. And they help us in advance identifying local market opportunities and also the market entry, of course, then once it comes to collaborations. And very important for our webinar today, we are organizing matchmaking missions to both target countries, two to the US and 2 to China. And we will hear more about that from Paul afterwards to New York. Here, as I mentioned before, you can see, for example, the value chains we defined and how our cluster SMEs add up their values at each value chain point. And we have defined different key areas. In this picture, for example, just waste management, actually recycling is missing, but you can see we have the areas of air quality, green buildings, smart cities, smart energy and energy efficiency, and so on. That's how we want to sum up the strengths from our SMEs to offer solutions. Overview on the map again, and the duration 2 years, 5 fast partners, and in total more than 800 SMEs in the field of Cleantech involved. Because it's on the one hand our cluster partners from the 5 clusters listed below, but also from the international Cleantech network. And target groups, of course, clearly SMEs, but also companies already being active in the target markets, always in the Cleantech sector. Also the named strategic partners, which can be other Cleantech clusters, but also SME-orientated organizations. We want also to establish cross-sectoral collaboration with other non-participating cluster organizations, and of course, very important decision makers, like regional authorities, national governments, and so on. Coming back to the matchmaking missions, the first one we have already fixed with New York in May this year, and there is another one planned for China for November this year. We will keep you updated on that as well. And here, just to give you an insight how the preparation for this matchmaking mission looks like. First, we started with the help of our strategic partners in the market, with the market research, and it is ongoing also demand sourcing. We are collecting the profiles from you, the SMEs who want to participate in the matchmaking missions, and also of the interested buyers to match them. We are in the middle of establishing an online internationalization toolkit, which unfortunately will not be ready for this US mission, but for the Chinese then in November for sure. And this toolkit will imply a learning area with market information, also information on necessary funding and so on. And always in advance, like today, we will have a virtual meeting with buyers and market experts from the US or China. And yeah, this is how it looks like, how we prepare this mission. And this is just a short overview, like the opportunities and advantages for the SMEs participating. On the one hand, we foster sharing resources with the mentioned support toolkit, but also with the collected profiles and exchanging them. We want to collaborate with you, integrated solutions along the mentioned value chains and during the matchmaking missions, and of course exploit rising demand via working with the strategic partners, tapping into these local networks and building up pipelines for international projects. So to give the floor to the other, I think, more interesting speakers afterwards, I hope I could give you a short insight to our project. You are very welcome to answer, to take questions. First, I will give the floor to Paul, who will present, I think, our mission, and then we are happy to answer your questions. Paul?
Yes, thank you, Maria. I will share my screen. Does everybody can see my screen now?
Yes, in presentation mode.
Yes, just 1 second.
Just one, sorry, Paul, just one information. I've muted almost everyone on the call because there was a lot of background noise. If you want to jump in and say something at some point in time, please go to the right hand of your screen and unmute yourself on the red icon with the microphone. That's all. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Frederick. I will now take a few minutes to present you our matchmaking mission in New York. So to present you this mission, I will try to answer to 5 questions. For who is this mission? Why New York? What will we do in New York? How much will it cost? And how to participate at the mission? So first question, for who? For 2 kinds of actors, public and private actors looking for solution or providing solution in Cleantech. It can be, of course, SMEs, very important, but also some big companies, and public actors linked to smart cities or decision makers. This mission is related to different sectors, 3 big sectors, the Cleantech sectors. That is related to products or services that reduce negative environmental impacts. Energy, of course, mainly energy efficiency and renewable energy, but also the sector related to smart topics, smart cities, smart buildings, smart grids. Those are those smart topics. Why New York? For two reasons. The first one is that there will be in May the Smart City Expo in New York. I will talk about that just after. But also because New York is a city who is investing in sustainable and smart solution to reduce drastically its greenhouse gas emissions. The Smart City Expo will bring together local and international leaders and influencers for smart city technologies. I think it will be very interesting to meet people, but also to go to conferences. Don't hesitate to go to the website of the Smart City Expo to learn more about it. We will try to send you a list of the conferences, the best conference to see there. This is the program of the mission. There will be the mission will last 4 days. The first 2 days will combine conferences and B2B meetings. As you can see here, the B2B meetings are in a color, and we will stay mainly at 3 different places. Belgium is the Belgian American Chamber of Commerce. They have a complete floor in their building for us that will be used for the B2B meeting, so we will have enough place. And we will also go to the Urban Future Lab, which is the New York City hub for smart cities, smart grid, and clean energy. And they have their own business incubation program for startups. So it's also very interesting. And the last place is, of course, the Smart City Expo. That can be very useful for B2Bs and to learn by conferences. And the last day, 10 May, it will be more practical because we will have visits. For example, here we have already one planned visit. We will go visit the Brooklyn Microgrids related to also the blockchain technology. And there will be other visits that we have to organize, but we will communicate about that soon. So that's it for the program for the 4 days mission. But of course, for those who want also have a bit tourism, it's also possible, of course. The estimated costs for the mission is in a range of 1,700 to 2,000 euro. And if we look in more detail, we can see that we have the following costs. For example, the flight from 300 to 900 euro, the hotel 750 euro for 3 nights. There will be a full package for the mission, which will include a promotional price of entry for the Smart City Expo, and we will also give access to the workshop and the events, so that will be visits, things, reception, and so on. And there will be no participation fee for the members of the cluster of the project, but also for the cluster of the ICN, which is the International Cleantech Networks. And there will be a participation fee of 300 euro for the others organization. And finally, it's also possible, that's important, to get some support from your regional export agency. For example, in Belgium, it's possible to get 900 euro. And for another example, is in Austria, there is the Internationalization Center Styria that can provide the support of 50% of the total cost of the mission. how to participate? It's very simple. For the members of the clusters of the project of the ICN network, you just have to contact your cluster, and we will do the rest. And for the others, you can contact Charlotte Labbé, which is on the phone now, but you have also her email address here. And also, for information, we have already more than 10 interested participants. So I think it's a very nice opportunity for companies, for European companies that will develop their activities in New York. And of course, we are available for any question. I will now give the floor to Maya Sevarovic. I'm sorry for the name, but
no problem.
Maybe I will introduce you, and you can already take the power and share your screen.
Yes.
So maybe just a word about Austria. Advantage Austria is the foreign trade promotion organization which offers support to Austrian companies interested in exporting worldwide. It provides a broad range of intelligence and business development services. So Maya is from Advantage Austria and is based in Chicago, and she is responsible for business development and covers the construction, green building, infrastructure sectors, as well as environmental technologies. So thank you, Maya, to be there. We are now looking forward to your presentation on the topic U.S. market inside, business, the opportunities and challenges for European cleantechs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, for the introduction. Right in the beginning, I would like to apologize. I have a little bit of a raspy voice, and I'm fighting a cold and a sore throat, so please bear with me. Can everybody hear me?
It's very clear.
Yeah, very good.
Maya.
For those of you joining us from Europe, good afternoon. And for those of you in the U.S., good morning from Chicago, and welcome to the next part of the webinar. As Paul mentioned already, the webinar, this part of the presentation is entitled U.S. Market Insights, Business Opportunities and Challenges for European Cleantech SMEs. Paul did a very nice job introducing me already. Just very briefly, I'm with Advantage Austria, the Austrian Trade Commission in Chicago, and responsible for the environmental technology sector, among others. What do we do? Very simply said, we are your first contact for any and all inquiries related to the environmental sector, in particular waste and recycling, as well as water and wastewater. This presentation will focus on developments in the areas of water and wastewater, waste and recycling. Of $19.3 billion, the U.S. is the world's largest economy. This is about the same as the combined economic output of all European Union member states and almost twice that of China. The economic growth for 2018 will be around 2.6%. From January to November 2017, Austria's exports to the United States totaled 9.7 billion euros, which roughly translates to 6.8% of Austria's total exports of goods. Overall, these numbers show an increase of 11.4% over the previous year. Based on these facts, the U.S. was Austria's second most important trading partner in 2017 in terms of exports. Worldwide market volume for environmental technology is a little over $1 trillion. The U.S. currently has a world market share of 29% as both the world's largest producer and consumer of environmental technology products. In 2016, the environmental technology sector generated a revenue of approximately $330 billion. The revenue was generated in the following fields: 54% services, 21% equipment, and 25% resources. is primarily driven by growing environmental legislation and infrastructure projects in the country. As I mentioned before, this presentation will focus on the developments in the areas of water and wastewater, waste and recycling.
Sorry, Maya, to interrupt you. Could you just close the window of the webinar, the Cisco webinar, because it kind of blinds out the spot of your presentation for the rest of us? Yes, perfect. Thanks.
I apologize, but do you still see something? Should we move the entire window?
No, it's perfect like that. I think it should be fine.
Okay. I apologize. I'm sorry for that. Success factors to take into account when considering entering the U.S. market. We like to tell our clients to evaluate the market by completing a detailed market analysis. What does that mean? Look into your competitors, determine the costs for the market entry, determine a market niche, and most importantly, get to know the market conditions at an early stage. Austrian companies and international businesses need to understand the their potential customers and adapt their product to the U.S. market. We tell our clients America is anders, and once they're here, they know exactly what we're referring to. The business culture in the U.S. is different from what we are used to in Europe. Doing business in you customize your product according to the U.S. requirements. You have to adapt your advertising materials and advertising appearance. What does that mean? Clear and precise promotional materials, product descriptions, services being offered, including the company's homepage in professional English are a must. For a successful market entry, it is usually necessary to find a local partner. And in addition to trade shows, social networks are also extremely important. We all know Americans are marketing experts and have tremendous sales and networking skills. This brings the most important part, basically, and this is what everyone needs to keep in mind. You have to know what your customer needs, and personal contacts and knowing what your customer needs are king. Just a moment. It won't. Oh, there we are. This particular slide shows a handful of successful Austrian companies in the U.S. We have a great group of companies already doing business in the U.S., including those with their own subsidiaries in the country. Among these companies with a focus on the environmental technology industry are Andres, S-Kern Messtechnik, as well as Martinek Water Management. These companies have extensive expertise in the water and wastewater area, offering solutions for reduction of water loss or evaluating the use of water and measuring the data. Recycling and waste branches of the industry, we have key players such as Unter and Comtech in the category of air pollution control, Andres again, and Schützens. Austrian companies can offer innovative and efficient solutions in each and every category due to their proven experience and have established a stellar reputation in the U.S. So we basically also known for Sound of Music, Mozart or the Sachertorte, and we are of course very proud of that. That environmental protection will not be a priority during the president's tenure. Since February 2017, Scott Pruitt has been head of EPA, which stands for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. The head of the EPA has a conservative attitude towards environmental issues. And having said this, the government has reduced funds for the Environmental Authority and cut the EPA's budget from $8.6 billion in 2016 to $5.6 billion in 2018. In addition, it was also announced in 2017 that the U.S. plans to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement, reasoning that this agreement would disadvantage the U.S. economically. Announced in October of last year, Tweed will work on the withdrawal of the Clean Power Plan, which was originally drafted during Obama's tenure and should become effective sometime this year. These developments, of course, may prove to be an obstacle to the industry's growth. I'm aware of the need for improvements in its urban infrastructure in terms of quality, usability, energy efficiency, and sustainability in order to maintain its competitiveness on the international market. This results in market opportunities for Austrian companies in the fields of urban technologies in the US. And recently also announced a plan to build and repair the nation's bridges, highways, waterworks, and other infrastructure projects, expecting $1.7 trillion in overall investment over the next 10 years. It shows a few examples of what some cities and US states are doing in the environmental sector in order to attain their goals. San Francisco, for instance, aims for a 100% recycling rate by 2020. Chicago has voluntarily committed to meeting Kyoto targets regarding the Chicago Climate Action Plan, CCAP. California, for instance, consumers must already pay an e-waste fee when purchasing an electrical appliance, and the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, DEP, provided roughly $2 million for recycling subsidies in 2017. What could companies do? Where are the opportunities? Here are just a few notes on trends and opportunities. Due to the low energy prices, the construction of energy-efficient buildings or the use of renewable energy were not widely considered in the past. Waste was mainly landfilled instead of recycled or reused. And neglected infrastructure are positive factors for market opportunities in the field of infrastructure development. The US over the past decades has and continues to be defined by steady population growth. And the major increase of the last several years was registered in its metropolitan areas. I prepared a slide on future events and the most important and largest trade shows and conferences in this industry, starting, for instance, with WEFTEC, which is going to be held in September in New Orleans. WEFTEC focuses on the water and wastewater area of the environmental technology sector. In the areas of waste and recycling, we have the Waste Expo, which is also an annual trade show taking place in Las Vegas this year. Next, we have the American Waterworks Association annual conference and exposition taking place in Las Vegas as well in June of this year. And one in Canada, the Water Quality Technology Conference and exposition taking place in November in Toronto. Of my presentation, this concludes my part for today. As indicated in the beginning, this was just a very brief overview of the market developments in the US. We, of course, are happy to hear from you and work with you. For specific questions, please feel free to reach out to us directly. And don't forget, we are your one-stop shop. We work with you before, during, and after project. We will research companies you may consider working with. We can connect you to our local network, experts such as CPAs and accountants, lawyers and industry experts, and we very much look forward to working with you. Thank you so much for your time and interest, and liebe Grüße und auf Wiederhören.
Very much, Maya, for this presentation, very interesting presentation. Maybe we can now take a little time for one or two questions. Does somebody want to react to this presentation and have a question for Maya?
I think I would just like to add up, thank you, Maya, for your presentation, that definitely every trade commission and agency in each of the country can offer the same service. Like this was the example for Austria, and it shall be an example that all the participants also in Belgium and France at this webinar have the same opportunity in their country and use this kind of services. And this is just an example for Austria.
Perfect. Thank you again, Maya, for this presentation. We will now give the floor to Mark Sweeney from Hodgson Huss. Hodgson Huss, which is a full-service law firm specializing in assisting European companies, particularly Cleantech companies, to expand their activities in the United States. Mark, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Mute your microphone. It will be better.
Okay. So my name is Mark Sweeney. I work at Hodgson Huss in the Albany office. I have a lot of experience working with renewable for the last 15 years. I've worked on a variety of wind farms, many of the wind farms that were developed in New York State beginning in 2006, and I continue to do so. Our practice has grown into the solar space, storage space, working with the regulatory body in New York State called the Public Service Commission, which regulates utilities and developers of solar and wind facilities. Being said, New York State is a very progressive state and has set forth a standard of trying to achieve 50% renewable energy for its grid by the year 2030. In that effort, New York has taken major steps to try to promote development of both solar and wind. And with the election of President Trump in 2016 and his attitudes towards fossil fuels, coal in particular, as well as his fundamental belief that climate change is not for real, there's been some very serious changes on a policy level that are percolating in Washington and that will affect, could affect, the development of renewable energy in the United States, and basically highlighting the role of the states in this process. So, is discuss some of the major changes that are occurring, and so basically, as everyone probably knows, President Trump has rejected the notion of climate change and has, based on that belief, sought an aggressive rollback of environmental regulations, of policies and regulations put in place by the Obama administration that were intended to combat climate change and its effects on the American environment, and also the world environment. As a result, the future of U.S. energy policy is uncertain at this time. The President has ties to the oil and gas industry and has frequently reiterated his strong support for the coal industry. Based on these comments throughout the campaign and his subsequent time in office, there's been concern regarding the federal government support of critical elements that are part of renewable energy financing, such as tax credits and other subsidies, and also attempts to alter wholesale power markets to benefit coal and nuclear generation based on either reliability or the storage of fuel in place. So those are major concerns that are before American energy policy. As administration has taken a fundamental position that change is not a danger that should shape U.S. energy policy. As Maya mentioned, the U.S. has withdrawn or intends to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord, and that the Trump administration has ordered the Environmental Protection Agency, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, to begin to rescind the Clean Power Plan that was put in place by President Obama. There is litigation going on regarding the administration's ability to do that, and that litigation will continue over time and affect the timing and degree to which the Clean Power Plan is modified or revoked. Creating this driver of policy, the administration has followed through with a rollback of substantial federal environmental regulations, all which were aimed at combating climate change. Basically, the federal has opened federal lands for drilling, particularly in Alaska, the Wildlife National Refuge. Portions of that have been opened up for drilling. They've approved the Keystone Pipeline, and they've also have looked at the elimination of subsidies for renewable energy in the federal budget. That has not occurred. That the existing production tax credits and investment tax credits remain viable. However, it's uncertain whether they'll be extended as was anticipated under the Clean Power Plan. And in his State of the Union speech, President Trump summed it up by saying, "We have ended the war on American energy, and we have ended the war on beautiful, clean coal." And in that statement is his perspective of both the fundamental change in belief on climate change and its effects, as well as his America First centrist view of policy, where he's looking to promote and support American sources of energy, which, in our opinion, should include also renewable energy here domestically.
Sorry to interrupt you shortly. Could you also please close the box on the right top because of the CISAPEX meeting?
Yep.
Thanks. Because it lines out again the part of the slides from you for us.
You got it.
Thanks.
So the risks to renewable energy that are there as a result of these policy changes are mainly from the fact that this change in policy creates a certain amount of uncertainty and could cause some trepidation in the energy markets in the United States, which would affect the way utilities would plan for their fuel mix in coming years. The reason that that's important is these fuel mixes are planned years in advance and having a variety of sources available to provide the load needed in the United States. That fuel mix is increasingly being covered by natural gas fired facilities. Nuclear are in place, but not many new ones are being developed. Renewable energy is growing strongly, but it still has a smaller share of the load than what is intended. And so the way the utilities are looking down the road, if the uncertainty continues, it could affect the mix of fuels that they're going to buy or require. So that is something to keep in mind and to keep looking at as we go forward. Also, the directive from the Trump administration to replace the Clean Power Plan, the EPA has been directed to develop new regulations to replace the Clean Power Plan. It's a very complex regulatory exercise as these regulations cover a variety of different industries, resources, and have very integrated and deep-reaching tentacles that would have to be untangled and then replaced. So this effort may take years to complete, and upon their completion, we would expect them to be fully litigated by stakeholders, particularly environmental groups such as the National Resource Defense Council, Sierra Club, and others. One of the options that would be in place in replacing the Clean Power Plan would be to set much weaker carbon dioxide targets for states, which would reduce pressure on coal plants to be retired altogether due to that need to retrofit with technology that would meet those standards. By weakening those targets, lesser investments would be needed to be made and may allow those coal plants to continue to operate. That would offset the driver in the Clean Power Plan that was intended to promote the development of renewable power or the conversion of coal-powered facilities to natural gas. Other risks to renewable energy are tariffs that the federal government is imposing. As everyone is probably aware, President Trump has issued a 30% tariff on solar panels from China. He's also recently announced tariffs to be placed on steel and aluminum, and it's possible that further tariffs could be announced on other commodities. These materials and commodities are all necessary for the states to achieve the standards they set forth in the renewable portfolio standards, and could basically cause costs to increase and put pressure on marginally economic projects, meaning that fewer projects could be developed based on the economics that are currently available. Lifting of the ban on drilling in the Arctic Wildlife Refuge area. They've identified 1.5 million acres of the refuge along coastal plain to be available for leases, and the estimates they're relying on show 5 to 16 billion barrels of oil are contained in that area. Despite the claims of the Department of Interior at the time, the reshaping of the federal lands and the reduction of monuments within the western United States are not necessarily for efficiency. They're actually been found to follow maps filed by oil and gas drilling companies to open up areas for drilling that were otherwise precluded. Increasing the supply of oil and natural gas, that again could reduce the pressure to develop renewable energy in their place. So the next slide is talking about will coal trump renewables, a little play on words there, but basically the thought that's being discussed by utilities and regulators in the New York ISO is that market forces and the need for the investor-owned utilities to electricity to the ratepayers in a reliable manner at a regulated rate will continue to hold and drive out coal power generation. The data shows that they continue to retire coal-fired generation plants, and there's no expectation at this time of adding any more coal capacity in the next decade. The market is starting to turn from a subsidized renewable energy standard and looking towards a standard where the price, the cost of carbon is captured and then used to reflect the value of the sources that are generating renewable energy. That is not in place at this time, but it is something that the New York ISO and other utilities are talking about moving towards. And the Public Service Commission in New York is very keen to look in that direction to find a way to properly balance the mix of fuels, including renewable energy. As other utilities plan their power mix changes significantly in advance, and at this time, the largest sectors for continued growth remain utility-scale solar and wind, distributed generation and storage, and natural gas production. And as I mentioned also, the production tax credits and investment tax credits were not eliminated in the President's tax cut bill that was passed this past year, and they remain in place, but it is uncertain whether or not they will be extended. Shows the power mix as it has shifted from 2000 to the present, and it shows a steady decline of coal power generation in that period of time, with a rise of natural gas and a rise in renewable energy from 7% to 16%. Given the renewable portfolio standards in many states, including New York, there is substantial incentive to develop renewable power, and it's intended to continue at this time. For example, in New York alone, the state has set a goal of producing 3,000 megawatts of solar power on rooftop facilities alone, not even including utility scale. That 3,000 megawatts is on an average load in New York, a load day in New York, which is about 19,000, 20,000 megawatts. The 3,000 megawatts from rooftop solar alone is quite a substantial chunk. So as that effort continues, that percentage of renewable energy will only continue to grow in a significant way. States to maintain environmental standards and renewable energy policies are expected to change or even increase in the light of federal changes. At this time, 29 states have adopted standards requiring utilities to meet targets for increased reliance on renewable fuels. California and New York are two of the leading states that are doing so, and both seek to have 50% of their electrical power provided by renewable energy by 2030. Will soften the impact of such moves. The utilities at this time are overwhelmingly opposed to attempts to reshape the wholesale power markets, and they resisted the efforts of the administration in trying to bolster coal-fired generation and nuclear generation based on a grid resilience theory, meaning that they're available all the time and therefore they should get a higher price of electricity. That was rejected by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, and we don't expect to see that pursued any longer. The Department of Energy also refused to use their emergency authority under the Federal Power Act to keep uneconomic coal plants in operation. Basically, several coal-fired generators had applied and sought relief under the emergency authority of the Federal Power Act to give additional incentives to them, subsidy to them, in order to keep their plants going. And that was rejected by the Department of Energy and is not likely to occur as well. Again, that will, preserve the space that's been set aside for renewable energy. Shows some of that there's large investments in renewables that are continuing, that there's continued growth in many states. Texas is a leader in wind power with 22,000 megawatts of wind power being in place. Solar continues to grow in many states, and as I said, in New York, there's several. Solar power is very much being incentivized in New York. Development is ongoing, and many projects will be coming online in the next year or two, which will increase the New York capacity in total, and possibly bring it into this list of solar states or solar producers. Wind is popular in New York as well. The Public Service Commission is entertaining several applications under Article 10 of the Public Service Law for 100-megawatt wind farms or larger, and those continue to be sought for development. So I will just say that we would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Our practice area includes, for renewable energy, includes everything from permitting to regulatory matters before the Public Service Commission, real estate, corporate matters, tax matters of all types. So please feel free to ask any questions you may have of us on this presentation.
Thank you, Mark. I think this is Dan Spitzer. I'm going to take it from here. Hopefully, I'm clicking the right things. There we go.
Yep.
We're up and running. So, hello, everybody. This is Dan Spitzer. I work with Mark, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. Hodgson Huss has been doing renewable energy and Cleantech for a very long time. We wrote the mortgage on the first long-distance power line for J.P. Morgan when it was built from Buffalo to Niagara Falls. We've been at renewable energy since long before it was called renewable energy, and we've been helping Cleantech for as long, and so it's a pleasure for us to talk to you. We've also specialized, because we were born in a border city, we have long experience in dealing with the unique aspects of cross-border transactions and the complications that brings to the flow of business. So I really appreciate this opportunity. Let's talk about resiliency in microgrids. Microgrids happen to be a particular interest of mine. I wrote my master's dissertation on microgrids and how they can be used to support particularly low-income populations. And so it's an area that I've spent a lot of time in, and it's a developing field that, not surprisingly, got a lot of benefit from Hang on a second. I apologize. My screen is not responding to me. There we go. Not surprisingly, got a lot of benefit from what is the kind of things that wake people up. Well, people get woken up that there's a real problem about climate change and other things when things don't go well. And specifically, Superstorm Sandy was a real eye-opener. And obviously what happened this year with Hurricane Harvey and with other events, people are really recognizing in America, or at least those people who are not in the White House are really recognizing that climate change is not an abstract discussion. It's a very real situation that needs to be dealt with. To give you an impact in Sandy, over the millions of people lost heat and power. We literally are still dealing with situations. Here, I'm in New York City today, and one of the major subway tunnels just closed down for a year and a half for repairs for damage that occurred during Sandy. But the interesting thing that people noticed was while Sandy was going on, you looked out over this blacked out landscape, you still had situations where there were some campuses and housing projects that had, in fact, still had power. Princeton University, which has one of the largest microgrids, had never went dark, and in fact, Princeton became a center of recovery efforts because they were still online. So you had an integrated system of power generation and distribution that was able to operate without the grid. And that, of course, is what a microgrid is. A microgrid is simply a smaller version of the electric grid. And when the first electric systems were built, this was Edison's model. He built power plants all around the world, and they were connected to a set of customers. And when the capacity was filled, he simply moved on to the next system. Tesla came along with AC and better ways to do things, and we now have the integrated systems. But a microgrid is really no more than a set of interconnected loads and distributed energy resources, particularly renewable resources, we hope, that can, within a certain area, act as one controlled entity, but most importantly, can island itself from the grid when there's a need to do so. So there's three types, basically, of microgrids: the standalone systems, which are making a huge difference in rural areas and areas that have never had energy. A lot of the conversation about those microgrids is in areas like Africa, which haven't previously had energy systems. But in fact, we work with rural areas of Alaska, where we're setting up microgrids to provide energy to remote villages. Systems can cover a single building, and most of what we're seeing are those that cover a unified set of properties, such as a college campus, or with virtual systems where you have different systems that are just tied in more by business model. And so what's going on is microgrids present enormous opportunity. If you look at the parts of the puzzle that can go into a microgrid, think of the opportunities for companies like yourselves to provide services. Microgrids are different forms of energy, particularly distributed energy, but they're also controlled by advanced power management systems, which are software and electronics and communications, all the smart grid elements that are necessary to make things work within this set and make things work in a manner which it allows all of this to go on like our current system works. We all know what consumers want. Consumers want to flip a switch and the lights come on. That's the promise. And so microgrids must work on the same method. But you have enormous opportunities presented by the fact that you have some things such as storage, which are both loads and generators, the ability to hook into electric vehicles, not only to service those vehicles and provide alternative to fossil fuels for the transport, but to literally use those stored vehicles' batteries as an energy source to avoid having to switch on peaker plants. All of these elements that are here, you should be looking at and saying, these are business opportunities that microgrids present that I don't have with the current setup. And what's going on is the new business model. This is the thing that you really need to understand when we're talking about changing the face of energy. For generations, the model of energy across the world was a centralized monopoly that was promised a monopoly set of profits in return for providing quality service. And you had central plants. The utility controlled the generation, the utility controlled the transmission, or with other utilities controlled the transmission, and the utilities controlled the distribution. And their job was to push electrons down the line, get them to a safe location at a guaranteed return that was promised. And it actually worked fairly well from what's known as the golden era of utility generation, from basically the post-war period through to the 70s. But as the gas embargo and the oil embargo took place, as cost of nuclear plants spiraled out of control, this model really stopped working at providing cheap energy that enabled economies to grow, and people started looking for deregulation as a way to present things in a different way. And while in America we've had some interesting experiences with deregulation, particularly because of what went on in California, this model is taking hold across the country, where utilities are becoming customer service platforms, and utilities are no longer the central generation. We now have the distributed generation of microgrids, or whether it's DER. We have solar facilities and the types of things that Mark was talking about. We have massive fuel cell facilities coming online. Hodgson Russ has currently we have solar, wind, landfill gas to energy, fuel cell storage, microturbines, all working together. And the interesting thing about this is, and this is something to keep in mind as we look for opportunities for all of your companies as you go forward, what all of these things have in common, though, is we still look at microgrids. They're all still almost backed by natural gas as the supply source of last resort. So even Princeton, which I mentioned, their microgrid is backed by natural gas. This is why storage becomes so important. This is why other forms of generation and the ability to reduce fossil fuel, microgrids by themselves work, can incorporate all these different opportunities, but it's essential that the technologies continue to advance to reduce the fossil fuel aspect of this. And so as we see solar become more efficient and storage then tied into solar, and we're seeing across the states, California now has a mandatory requirement for storage, and the utilities have gone out for bids. New York is a little slower, but what's gone on across the country is that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has now required storage to be something that can be bid in to the regional transmission organizations' capacity pools. In other words, storage is being recognized as a way to help deal this. That's a central part of microgrid technology and business model, the ability to hold that energy and then send it where you need it when it's an emergency, if it's an island situation, but obviously the peaking ability to avoid shaving, to use time of day rates to save money, but also as the storage increases, as the ability to use wind, which is best resource at night, solar, which has a peak time approximately 2 to 4 hours below peak usage times, and even out those time uses that we deal with. So the microgrids also can address a lot of other issues that go on as we move away from these central power plants. Microgrids can address grid stability issues. And if you're thinking about this from a business model, and again, I want everybody to remember that the physical part of this is the business model is just as important. These are all different revenue streams for a microgrid user. And even when that microgrid user is a low-income housing project which can sell services back to the grid, whether it's black start, whether it's required synchronization of current and voltage to balance loads. These are all services that the microgrid can provide, in some cases, better than standard generating plants can. And so the other aspect of this is that they become a very interesting, if microgrids can be the central point for the connection between DER and the grid. Utilities worldwide have increased identification of difficulties handling all the inflows at intermittent times of renewable resources. I think across Europe and the United States there's been stories of problems with overload of energy coming online when the systems aren't really acclimated to handling it and balanced to handling it. Microgrids provide a natural way to even that out. If you look at the United States now, this is a map from GTM Research. This shows you where microgrids works are going on. We are now tracking some 1,900 microgrids under construction, or microgrids that are proposed. This is not a future event. This is the way energy is moving in America. You don't see large-scale buildings that are being built now without consideration of this. Hudson Yards, which is the largest real estate project in American history, has this type of technology as an integral part of it. You're seeing this across campuses. It is saving money by reducing costs. It is increasing reliability. It is making the value of resiliency important. And in many ways, what's holding us back is not the technical folks. You folks who are on the phone, who are the technical companies, I could not possibly say how impressed I am with all of you and the things that you've all come up with. But the business models, frankly, are slower in coming along. The microgrids can sell energy back to the grid, but are they going to be regulated by utilities? We're starting to see these rules come into effect. These rules are essential if we're going to be able to securitize these revenue streams, and if we're going to be able to have investments in microgrids, and we're going to be able to truly move to a prosumer, a consumer-centric orientation of energy services. Energy is moving from a commodity industry to a service industry, and microgrids are letting that happen. But we need to answer these questions about what is the responsibility of the legacy utilities in terms of quality backup provides and provider of last resort rules. Are regulators going to allow microgrids to sell services? Mark alluded to what's going on in New York, California, and Minnesota, and other states are all looking at how are we going to give value to the microgrids so that they therefore have sufficient revenue streams to justify the investments. How are these markets going to operate? The FERC rules on storage that I mentioned are essential to letting these type of devices participate in the market and truly gain value for all the services that they can provide, particularly these ancillary services that are not often recognized. Additionally, if we're truly talking about decarbonizing the environment, are we going to go to a social cost of carbon cost? New York State has done that in some cases, but more on the subsidy side. The state of Washington has been the leader in trying to get a formal carbon tax. Their most recent efforts were defeated. The governor there has been very persistent. We really don't have carbon taxes built into pricing yet in America, but it's moving towards that in those states that are trying to be the leaders in climate change relief and response. But it's difficult because it adds cost when you're competing for capital with jobs with other states that are not taking the same approach. That balkanization of the American market, where the wholesale is governed by the federal government and the retail is governed by each state, is essential to understanding the opportunities as the market changes. There's very different opportunities presented by states like New York, Massachusetts, California that are seeing the value in these other services, and other states that still favor sort of this traditional centralized approach in the way that electric costs are paid back for. So these interplays become very important, and how investor-owned utilities and publicly owned utilities are going to respond as they lose customers to microgrids. How are they going to be compensated? Will microgrids be able to use existing wires? At what rate will they be paid for doing so? How are they going to be compensated? Who's going to have responsibility for those assets? These are all things that we're moving for, but we're moving forward. So lastly, one of the things I think is most interesting in understanding the changing face of energy, companies like Schneider Electric that are now promoting no money down microgrid installation where they go into a building or a campus. They, in effect, bring financing along with their expertise, and they are creating financial solutions right along with the physical solutions. In America, as in all places, the financial part is just as important as creating these solutions because the energy costs need to be competitive for the industries to be competitive. Capital looks for the lowest cost of energy and other resources, and these type of financial solutions are essential. but what microgrids have allowed energy provision to do is we really are going from a centralized system to a truly decentralized system with an enormous opportunity for those who can provide aspects of this service to the consumers in the market. Happy to answer questions on this topic. We'll provide these slides through the host, and happy to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel and Mark, for your presentation. Very clear and very interesting. Does somebody have a question for Mark or for Daniel?
I would like to start the question round. Thanks, Mark and Daniel, for your presentations. They were very interesting. What would be, I think, interesting for the participants of the webinar is, could you state like a typical touch point journey for the European SMEs here now being interested in approaching you for your support? I know, for example, from Austria, the company Blue Bauer is present here. They are producing wind turbines, very efficient ones for small wind parks, which can be integrated easily in existing infrastructure and buildings. So maybe what would be a typical touch point journey, and do you have some specific recommendations or already business maybe opportunities for the wind sector, wind energy sector?
Sure. So what we are seeing is the opportunities are based on the particular product. We can put you in touch with folks that we know who are in the real estate market, for example, looking to integrate clean energy into new projects. We help companies put together with, for example, with public housing authorities that are looking to incorporate those resources in. Once we understand, it's when we understand a client's product, when we understand what the market is that you're trying to reach, we can then advise you on how to establish your legal structure and other structures to, in effect, make sure the legal stays out of the way. But we can also put you in touch with, for example, NYSERDA in New York, which helps companies exactly like the one you mentioned get opportunities, gets people registered. New York, for example, has just pointed out a $1.4 billion worth of ratepayer financed subsidies that are going to go to wind and solar, but also has another $150 million set aside each year for behind-the-meter projects. So we could take small wind towers, put them on site, and the state works with engineers to identify these opportunities. We can put you into those programs. In California, it's more done through marketing directly to consumers. But some of the things that our firm does, for example, is set up making sure that you're in compliance with all of the marketing rules of a particular state, making sure that you have all the approvals from the particular regulatory agency. We work with public service commissions. I've been in front of the West Virginia Public Service Commission, the Tennessee Public Service Commission, or we have local counsel to help if you're of a nature that's large enough that requires that type of regulatory approval. One of the things that Mark spends a lot of his time doing is being in front of planning boards and zoning boards for that type of regulatory approval. So depending on what the particular consumer that you're looking to contact, whether it's wholesale or retail, we can guide you on the path to that connection occurring, and then the legal work that's necessary to get it done.
Okay, thank you very much. So meaning the SMEs or companies can either contact you directly or via us, the caster, with their profile and the technology they're offering, and then you're looking for the next steps where they would fit in the best into the current market needs.
Absolutely, and I would encourage everyone to reach out to Mark and myself as a resource. If there's somebody who we don't know, we know someone who knows them. We're very we're more connected than LinkedIn in terms of this. And where do you hear Bill? He's really tied into a lot of neat things, especially in the IoT and other areas, and is an amazing resource for companies to retain. But yeah, absolutely reach out to us with questions. Absolutely reach out to us with information that we can provide for you of a legal and non-legal nature. Obviously, we like to get hired as lawyers. That's how we make our living. But certainly look at us as a resource. That's how we build our partnerships. We have been around for 200 years because we build long-term relationships with partners.
That sounds great. Thanks a lot. I also just wanted to state here, because the question came up from some participants, we will provide you, of course, with the slides of all the presenters, and also the video of this webinar, which is recorded right now, of course, during the next days.
Daniel and Mark, just one question. Will you be available in May when we will be in New York with European companies, maybe for B2B meetings, if they want to speak with you about their project, their product?
Certainly. Absolutely.
Happy to be available for that.
Yeah. I'm attending the event. We're very familiar with Bill Chan, what you mentioned. We've been working with them for many years. If you need office space too, in addition to that, if we have room, we'll try to accommodate you in setting up meetings and work with you as best we can. But absolutely, we're going to be attending, and anything that we can do to help make those B2B relationships work better, or your time at the conference better. And anybody who wants to give me or Mark an excuse to visit you in Europe, we like that as well. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Perfect. Does anybody else have one question? Seems clear.
Remember, you have to unmute yourself, just in case you have one, meaning clicking on the microphone button, which is red right now.
Okay, let's go to the last presentation of this webinar with Bill Wom from 151 Advisor, which work with companies to execute market expansion plan that are part of their company's long-term strategic direction. Bill, are you there? Bill?
Let me just see if he's unmuted. Hang on.
Perfect. The floor is yours.
Let me just see. I can't see if he's on. Bill, are you there? Bill Rum?
Yes, I am. Hold on. I'm trying to figure out how to come off mute.
Yeah, Bill. It's good.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Frederick, Paul, Charlotte, thank you very much for having us here today. I appreciate to be part of this this exciting Cleantech adventure. So my name is Bill Rom. I'm the managing partner of 151 Advisors. We're headquartered out of New York and have locations in a number of different cities throughout the world. We're a leading IoT strategy and execution firm that has been helping technology enterprise organizations develop and execute go-to-market strategies that are focused on monetizing the connected world. We've been doing that for about 10 years. We're focused on helping organizations realize their full commercial potential, and our focus is really on helping the technology folks that are on this call, drive revenue, that ultimately adds and increases shareholder value to their organizations. We work with both ecosystem players as well as enterprise organizations, but since many of you are on the tech side, many of the clients that I've listed here are folks within the tech ecosystem that are responsible for providing a lot of the connectivity that goes into IoT-related solutions, or certainly any type of clean tech solution that requires some type of connectivity to move the important data back and forth to keep companies aware of what's happening at the endpoint. From a partnering standpoint, we work with many different types of organizations. Some of them you see listed on the left are around telecom and communications. We also work very closely with many international economic development groups in a variety of different countries, and have been doing that for upwards of 10 years. I hope we can soon add Denmark, Sweden, Belgium, France, and Austria to the list. So hopefully we'll be able to expand that list as we go forward with some of you. This is really based on helping our clients succeed, right? So we measure our success based on our clients' success. We provide a range of flexible services and very extensive IoT capabilities. It stems from market and industry research and intelligence to go-to-market strategy, planning, and execution. Maya touched on some of these points earlier, things that are very important as you look, to come into the U.S. market, is to develop and make sure you have ready a competitive analysis, the difference of your product, deal with pricing based upon U.S. market, deal with localization, and again, a lot of the focus around strategic partnership development and execution. For clients that we do get engaged with, we do assist in introductions to investment sources. So as we find a lot of the international firms that we work with that are looking to come into the U.S. market are clearly looking to do so to generate additional revenue. But also many times the inquiries and the clients that we hear from are looking to come into the U.S. Or the North American marketplace with the hope of raising additional capital to help them grow their business. Again, the insight I would share with everybody is to, focus on establishing a presence in the U.S., focus on grabbing your first couple customers as you go down that investment path. Most of our private equity and venture capital sources are very interested in seeing that companies are making a commitment to the U.S. market in order to grow their businesses. So our focus is around helping our clients analyze, strategize, and execute. Again, we get very closely involved with the clients that we work with, from understanding their business to confirming their goals. I'd say the difference in our firm to many other firms out there, and I can even point to the Accentures, the McKinseys, and the large consulting firms, is that we're very execution-oriented. So for many of our clients, especially our international clients, we'll work closely with Dan and Mark and his team on helping the companies get themselves set up in the U.S. We can all provide guidance and recommendations around accounting firms to deal with the ever-changing tax strategy. But when it comes to actually executing the business, in many cases, we'll wind up working side by side with the clients that we have, and actually carrying their business cards in some cases. Again, the focus is around strategy and revenue acceleration. Again, this is a little bit of a repeat, but I would say we're real advisors that provide real-time business intelligence, analysis, and strategies, and we can help you very quickly establish your U.S. relationships that can actually drive measurable results. Because all of us that are, again, looking to do this looking to come into the U.S. market are trying to do so to generate additional revenues. My partner, Steve, who's not with us today, leads our IoT or connected practice. Steve has been in the connected M2M space or machine-to-machine space for about 20 years and is a very global speaker on a variety of topics. We provide a tremendous amount of global thought leadership in smart cities, connected car, Cleantech, around the world, ranging from participating in events in Shanghai to just recently getting back from Barcelona at a large event. So you'll see us speaking on a very frequent and regular basis. You'll see us in the news on a variety of different publications on a variety of different topics. Much of this detail that I'm sharing with you here is available on our website. As far as the clean tech space goes, I really say clean technology really encompasses a very diverse range of products and services and processes that harness renewable materials and energy sources in a variety of different sectors, many of which have been touched on as part of this presentation. But what I thought I would do for everybody, is there a question there? What I thought I would do is focus a little bit on where are the areas of monetization today? Where are we seeing making money in the United States? I'm going to just highlight very quickly 5 key areas and just provide a little bit of data on each one of those segments. Smart parking solutions today, again, this comes under the umbrella of smart cities, which as we look at the marketplace, encompasses clean tech, because clean tech is very much integrated with what's happening around the smart city marketplace. So again, just to point out some of the highlights here, a huge amount of money, almost $150 million expected in smart parking solutions by 2025. Street lights and smart streets segment, again, considerable. I think we're going to see considerable growth, and we're seeing a tremendous amount of cities adopt energy efficient solutions and realizing tremendous savings in the first year, which I've highlighted here. When control, huge growth. Almost looks like a 3x growth by the time we get to the next century. And I point you to Barcelona as one of those cities that have really been able to embrace the Smart City Initiative. Tremendous to be learned there. Smart building management systems. The intelligent buildings market is expected to grow from almost 6.3 million last year to almost 22 in 2026, almost more than a 300% increase. And here, again, lots of different opportunities to make money. And again, one of the huge ones and again, it's IoT overall. We're at a place where the global market is looking to connect just about everything on the endpoint to increase operating efficiencies. So, the security marketplace as it relates to the connected IoT marketplace is constantly in a state of flux. But there's tremendous opportunity for our tech ecosystem players to be able to make money in these sectors. For those of you not focused on security as a product or a service, I just say that make sure as you enter this market as a clean tech provider that you do have a solid security story. Because it's very top of mind with U.S. companies that are looking to adopt new technologies. Some of the smart cities, clean tech challenges that we see, questions to make sure you have at the top of mind. So what do the taxpayers in each city, and want and need? I mean, clearly taxpayers are looking to pay less tax, but we also need taxpayers to be willing to fund a lot of the initiatives if we're working in the government sector and municipality sector. Certainly the private sector is different. Please, consider how are you going to take your solution to marketplace. Dan talked about being able to provide lots of different introductions to different groups that can help provide exposure. But some of the challenges that we see overall, and this is across all of these industry segments, is how as an ecosystem partner are you going to get your solution to market when it touches so many different aspects of either a municipality or an organization. So I would say look at, things to look at are clearly working with mobile operators or carriers, and certainly working in conjunction with other clean tech energy solutions providers here in the U.S. U.S. companies, as they implement solutions or as municipalities are implementing solutions, are really looking to have, one individual that they can point to that's the responsible party. So again, it's a very big challenge area in North America, not just for international companies coming into the space, but clearly for companies that reside here in North America in trying to pull together the many different piece parts that are involved in implementing any type of clean tech or smart cities type solution. And again, you've got to be able to figure out how you're going to make money in this space, as an ecosystem player. And that's clearly one of the areas in which we excel, is helping companies figure out what part of the solution are they going to play and how are they going to structure pricing and or ways to go to market to be able to capitalize on the opportunities. So lots of industry challenges must be faced head on. I think I think Maya had mentioned this in her presentation earlier, that finding partners is a critical component, working with some local resources. Try not to make it too complicated, on keeping it simple. If you are looking at the investor side and you are looking to generate additional capital as you look to expand into North America, set proper expectations based upon what your European growth results have been, and recognize that the market is, while the market is growing, nothing ever happens as fast as you like it to happen or would like it to, or want it to happen. Insights and learnings as we circle the globe on this topic is to focus on the problem that you're solving when you come into the U.S. marketplace. Don't focus on the product. Many times over the last 10 years, and probably working with 300 or 400 different types of tech companies, many times it's focusing on, I have a product. In the U.S., we really want to hear about the problem you solve with your solution and what the ROI on that solution is going to be. In summary, connections is still very hard in the North American ecosystem. It's a very fragmented market, and integrating and work with many of the different players that have to integrate and implement some of the technology that those of you who are on the phone have created is not that simple. Indeed, you have a lack of education of vendors, of enterprises, of consumers, and the security that I talked about a little bit earlier continue to be a major issue. So have a solid security story around your solution. The bullet point is one that is also, quite staggering. We hear about lots of success in connected solutions, but we're seeing at an enterprise level and even at a government level where the proof of concepts, where they're testing specific solutions or they're running trials, are failing at almost a 70% rate. Metrics solid. Have your use cases strong. Have your reference, your reference customers, available to talk to clients. And many of these trials are failing. And again, another shortfall is many of these implementations are being done in order to be able to gather data to be able to make additional business decisions. But we see less than 30% of the data gathered in a connected type of solution of not even being analyzed. So if you're looking to learn more about monetizing your solution as you look to the North American marketplace, I'd say please visit our website. We have a very extensive video library. We have a monthly newsletter, and we have a weekly podcast where we interview experts in a variety of different sectors. And we'd be very happy to talk to you individually, and we do hope to be able to participate in the May event, and would be happy to meet with any of you and learn more about what your plans are for North America.
Bill, for this clear presentation and for all the good advices based on the reality. Does somebody have a question for Bill?
Well, I would have one question. So thanks, Bill, also from my side for the very interesting presentation. You mentioned the diversity of the market players. And could you maybe explain a bit more about the division between private and public organizations in the field of smart city and IoT, and what would be your recommendation for the SMEs maybe to focus on, to keep all the different partners like in focus, or maybe start with the public authorities and for example, with New York, would the mayor's office of technology and innovation be addressed there for them?
I would say that it's clearly important to focus on the government agency or the municipality agency to educate them with regard to the solution. But many of the municipalities and the government agencies work with suppliers that deliver, implement, and maintain those solutions. So it's important to do both concurrently. You need to generate interest in the solution and again, if you generate interest with the agency and the agency wants to go forward with, let's say a proof of concept, more than likely they're going to point you to some of their approved suppliers. But if you choose the right partners to work with in the local market, I think we can help you identify who those partners are ahead of time so that you're working with those partnerships, concurrently. So I think you have to work both sides. And again, success at a municipal or government level will get you to those suppliers. but in order to expose your solutions, you should be working with the partners simultaneously. And I think between, Dan, Mark, and I and others on the phone, we can connect those dots.
Thanks for that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Frederick here from Copenhagen. I think there was somebody who wanted to ask a question. Bo Kallehauge from Danish Energy Management. Are you on the phone, Bo? No. Were you going to ask a question?
Yes, I was considering.
Could you just speak up a little bit, because it's very hard to hear, so if you get closer to the microphone.
Yes. How about this?
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Bo. I'm from Danish Energy Management. I was wondering what your experience is with companies who are not solely selling a physical product, but are selling consultancy services within the energy area, and the approach to the American market. If you have any experience or advices to companies who are dealing within the consultancy area.
Yeah, I would say we as a firm have generally not aligned well with folks that are in the consulting space that don't have a product or service, unless they're very, very focused in a very specific vertical market. So our success, or how we help our clients succeed, is based on replicating what they've done in other markets, right? So if you've had lots of success in Belgium or in Denmark, and you're looking to duplicate that here in the U.S., we can help, significantly if you're focused in a specific area. So that's one side related to us. Relative to being a consulting firm outside of the U.S. and looking to come into the U.S. marketplace, I would say, given just the geographic landscape, that we have, just the sheer size and dimension, I'd say it's very, very important for you to focus in a very specific vertical market, in a very specific niche. And again, I know you're doing that within Cleantech, but as you look to North American companies looking to work with you, I would say it gets back to establishing a presence, having a physical presence, and I think for North American companies it requires a lot of face time, so one-to-one type relationship to be able to work with a consulting firm outside of the United States.
If I could add something to that too, Bill. You mentioned you're from Denmark. Denmark has been extraordinarily successful at selling not only agricultural products, but also agricultural methods and consulting to the United States. And I think they generally do it, to my knowledge of it, the way that Bill talked about. They come here, they're a presence, and they establish themselves in the market. But you've got a successful model within your nation of not only specific companies, but of an entire industry that's, I think, we worked on for example, a biomass plant involving a Danish agricultural company was the provider of the materials, but they also were the provider of consulting services. And so I think there's a model within, it was mentioned by Maya and others at the beginning of the call, working with agencies from your country who help you to export. I think some of the model of what was done within the Danish agricultural industry may help you.
Okay. Thank you. Can I just? I don't know if this is the forum, but I just what Bill was talking about.
Speak louder, please, Bo. Close to the microphone.
Sorry, it's my microphone. It might not be that good.
Okay.
No, but I was just wondering after what some of Bill was talking about. With presence, and we in our company have been talking a lot about what values we are presenting to potential customers in the U.S. because our main focus in Denmark might be on the more soft values, sort of social values, when you're trying to export something like the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which we are dealing with, and also trying to market to the U.S. But we are sort of maybe more focusing on the if you could be so bold to say the humanitarian values, but we're also thinking of how much focus should we have on sort of the economic values, because that might not be so important to Danish companies. So what's your take on focusing on the sort of financial? You mentioned yourself the ROI on the product, but what is your experience with sort of how do we address the values of our product? If you know what I'm.
Dan and Mark, I couldn't really hear the question, so could I ask you guys to comment?
Sure. So basically, it's a matter of knowing who your buyer is. There are multiple companies that have internal procurement mechanisms that incorporate, for example, a social cost of carbon within their own buying mechanisms. You have companies, Unilever is probably the most famous, but around the world, that have said we want to be 100% sustainably sourced, and that is not a purely economic equation. Obviously, they have shareholder fiduciary responsibilities. If you look at the whole ESG movement, you have investors basically saying throughout the country to large companies and small companies, humanitarian values, how you behave yourself in other countries, how you behave yourself, how you go about sourcing, the kind of things that are the values that you're talking about. Now, if you go into a municipal procurement, usually that's like a low bid, or if you're talking about a large state or government complex. But even in those type of procurements, we're starting to see a move away from RFPs, if you will, to RFIs. Tell us who's the best company for us in terms of what our values are. It can be very subjective, so governments are less interested in that. But businesses not only are interested in those particular services, they brag about them. I was at a conference the other day where there was a plant manager from General Motors. He points out that General Motors now has 178 plants around the world that do not put one single ounce of waste in a landfill. And that's because they work with waste technology companies like were discussed at the beginning of the company. And that's clearly not necessarily a matter of just saving money on landfilling fees. It's a value that the company, General Motors and other automotive companies have done the same, have incorporated into the mechanisms that they use for producing their product. So I go back to what Bill talked about, knowing who your target is. So, this is something I teach my young lawyers. It's not about selling to a client how smart you are as a lawyer. It's figuring out what your client needs in order to make their business grow and understanding your client. It's the same thing with the folks that you're trying to reach, and there are a lot of companies that fit that it's not simply what's the lowest cost. The triple bottom line is becoming more and more important to private and public companies in America. And in fact, if anything, following on what Mark was talking about, I would say the trend towards incorporating values-oriented procurement and value-oriented decision-making has accelerated under the Trump administration in reaction to the Trump administration. So, again, we can help you, and Bill can help you understand who the client is, but that's what you're really talking about, is looking for people who think like you do. Then you can provide them a product that matches them rather than trying to just put a product out there.
Bill, I just repeat the question from before from Bo. I mean, I guess you heard it out for now anyway, but he was asking when to use when to use social or when economic sectors to sell the product, because in Denmark usually they focus more on social arguments and sectors like the sustainable development goals and economic sectors like the ROI. And yeah, if you want to add up on the answer before the response, that was the question from Bo.
Yeah, I don't know if I can add a lot of value around that, just because most of the work that we do and most of the work we do with clients is really focused on, how are they going to make money.
Right.
So I think the alignment is. I think the alignment, if your initiative is very social oriented, would be working with partners that are providing, solutions to the same segment, to where what the value contribution that you bring to the organization is complementary to what other products or services partners might be bringing to those. But again, I'll say I don't have a lot of first-hand relative to that. Dan or Mark? Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have anything to add to the question I asked. We could certainly help you in terms of what our firm does is, besides hooking you up with the kind of people who might be value-oriented, Dannon, for example, in the United States, absolutely, in their procurement looks for that. Some of the yogurt companies in upstate or Chobani, they look for those type of services, and we can help. What we do as lawyers, besides introductions, obviously, is we put together sustainability requirements in supply chain agreements. We therefore, if you have an ability to basically add a value, we can help incorporate those into the legal structure of what you're doing and help you. Others can help you promote that, if you will. But our job is to provide, if you will, the grease that makes the transaction happen. And we're seeing more and more within supply chain procurement contracts and how things are sourced and those type of things. So depending on your particular value proposition, we can help make sure that the transaction documents reflect what those values are.
I think I'll add one additional point. Is we have seen with a number of clients that have, whether it's a solution or a product, they've taken the approach of approaching the Office of Social Responsibility, depending upon how their product can enhance the image or the reputation of the company. And sometimes that's an easier way to get exposure within the company itself than trying to get into the supply chain people, or get the product people to take a look at what you're offering, because the product people, are very product oriented. So again, that has been an avenue that we've seen other clients have success with. So maybe something to consider. But I think, as Dan said, it depends on the company and, the initiatives they have around social responsibility.
Yep.
Thanks. I hope both that answered your question.
That's a great question, by the way. I don't get questions like that often enough.
Any other questions around?
This is Frederick from ICN in Copenhagen. If there are no other, obviously this is for the company, so please, this is just a request to the companies. Please don't hesitate to unmute yourself and bring forward any questions. This is the time. Otherwise, I would just ask a question to Bill, because we've been a bit discussing here whether we should focus on, the needs of our companies that are members of the clusters, or should we focus on the problem that we're trying to solve? And obviously, Bill, I think you gave a bit the answer to that question. So it's a correct interpretation. Focus on the problems that we have in the United States, the challenges, and if that is the real approach forward, what would be the next step? Could we have a more detailed view of some of the maybe even tenders or problems or challenges especially in New York City, because that's where we intend to go, but in the U.S. in general, and then maybe New York is just the meeting place for these matchmaking missions. What's your take on this, Bill?
Well, I think the issues that New York is dealing with, every city in America is dealing with. It's just a matter of, where they are in the process and what type of, capital do they have, or, funds they have to invest. So I think it's not hard to define the cities and municipalities that are the biggest groups looking and implementing solutions. So you can come up with a short list and then look to focus in other areas around the U.S.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Bill.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, Dan. Sorry, Dan. You're also based in New York. Any additional comments to Bill?
No, I basically agree. Anything that we can do to help you, we're in New York, and obviously we can give you, depending on a particular company, if someone, like, for example, on the small wind that we discussed before, we can help you set up specific opportunities, understand the regulatory environment for a particular product. Or, for example, I'm sure all of you who are producing any kind of a product with electronics know about the need to go through LUL approvals as opposed to the CE approvals. Our IP people help guide that kind of process. Same thing with other products in terms of regulatory approvals. We can look at case studies that companies have done. The largest energy service company in America is a German company called Siemens. So there's a lot of opportunity across the clean tech market for these things, and we could certainly give you some. If we have some specific examples of industries that are looking for case studies, we can bring in finance people who have done it, others who have done it. We can bring in folks from NYSERDA. Whatever we can do to make the experience here most meaningful for you, or through other webinars. If other, obviously, coming here is a limited time. I want to get you in front of as many businesses that can do business with you as possible. But we're happy to do further webinars that are more drilled down, if you will, into specific topics, specific industries, specific opportunities.
And Frederick, this is Bill. Maybe what I would also add too is that given the time difference, between us, I mean, clearly focusing on the East Coast markets, are easier just because of the time burden that it may put on some of the companies that are part of the clusters. So, certainly as you go west, it becomes a little bit more of a challenge because it kind of flips, the day completely upside down. So, I always tell clients that are coming into the U.S. to stay East Coast focused, to pick an entry point where you think you're going to get the greatest potential adoption, and spend your time there. And whatever you do, don't chase opportunities all over the U.S. because it's very hard, given the difference of flights from East Coast to West Coast. So stay East Coast focused, or if you're at the point of where you have the financial resources and the human capital resources where you can come in and establish a base camp, so to speak, then in that case, if you're going to move some of your resources, then make sure you focus on the market where you think you're going to have the greatest success. So we have a new client based out of Switzerland right now that does a lot of business primarily in Switzerland, but we're now looking at what cities in the U.S. should they set up in based upon the industries, the Swiss companies that are in those particular states that they could potentially do business with. So I'd highly recommend that to any of the tech companies that are part of the clusters to do that.
That's a good advice. Yeah, thank you.
I would like to add up on Frederick's questions. That's great. Thanks for your offer that you will provide our SMEs and meet up with us in New York with business opportunities there. It's like our approach. We send out to the SMEs who are interested in joining us on the mission that they fill out a template where they should state their clear interests, field of interest, and whom they want to meet. And once we have them, we will definitely forward it to you. On the other hand around, we are already collecting now market needs from the mentioned strategic partners. So maybe if I could approach you afterwards of the webinar with a template that I have and send it to you, and you take a look and maybe add up on information that you see that could be valuable for SMEs, that would be great.
That's a good
Speaking
point.
for Hodgson Huss, sure, be happy to.
Thanks a lot.
Good point, Maria.
Paul, is it okay if we allow? There would be the chance now for one last question. Otherwise, looking at the clock, we would present the next steps and finish the webinar.
Yes.
What do you say, Paul?
Yes, I completely agree. Does somebody else have a last question? Okay, So maybe once again, thanks to our four speakers for their very interesting presentation and for their answers to our questions. The next steps of this webinar are the following. Of course, for those who want to stay informed about the project, just register on this link, audio link. You will get information, news about the next webinars, the missions, also the missions in China and publication. To participate at the matchmaking mission in New York, just go to the slide above the slide 17. And also for information, as already said by Maria, this webinar is recorded and will be shared on YouTube with the following link, and also the presentation of the different companies will be shared on a SlideShare. Thanks also to all the participants, the companies, for their question and for their participation. Does somebody have something to add?
Thank you for the opportunity to participate. We greatly appreciate it.
Yes, thank you as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right.
So,
Thank you from Chicago, too.
Thank you, Maya. See you soon, and have a nice end of day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you to everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you,
Paul.
Frederick.
It was
Bye-bye.
perfect.